having empathy, consideration of other people's feelings, having a good, kind nature. Those are some of the characteristics of kindness, and that is my theme for today. Kindness as your business superpower. Hi folks, welcome to another live broadcast from Moon here on the I Hate Numbers show. In the next half an hour, I'm going to be looking at what kindness is and what it actually isn't, why it's of benefit to your business, and reason perhaps why we feel that businesses and individuals in businesses are not as kind as they should be, what's happened, what's the evolution, what's brought us to that stage, some tips and some ways to actually accelerate and develop kindness in your business. So hopefully you can join me after a short break with some little music here where we can explore those topics even more. If you're just coming onto the show and you're thinking, what's this wonderful program that I'm about to join in, watch on a catch-up replay, so hashtag replay. I'd love your company, I'd love your comments, but for now, let's have some heart-pumping. Hi folks, welcome to another weekly broadcast on I Hate Numbers, the show that's got lots of things in its arsenal and its mission to do. One is to help business owners out there improve their financial awareness, improve their money mindset, and obviously help your business make more money, save tax and time. That's a fantastic combination of ambitions there. So if you're just hopping onto the show, just coming along thinking, what's this that is into my feed on a Saturday morning or subsequent, then the show is definitely out there for you. If you're a business owner, if you're involved in the world of business, if you are somebody who's thinking of transitioning into the world of business, entrepreneurship, doesn't matter what the sector is, then I'd love to have you as your company. If you're thinking I've got nothing better to do except watch some really enthralling broadcasts, then obviously thank you for your company as well. If you've got some comments to share, then obviously chuck those into the comments box wherever you're listening from. If you're catching up with the replay, put a hashtag replay in there. I know you're out there and I can respond accordingly. Shall we crack on with today's show? Now, the theme for today is about kindness as a business strategy and how it plays such an important role in here. And before we dive deep into that, I think it's really useful to actually look at the notion of kindness, what it means. I've given you an indication at the very beginning that kindness is about having empathy, consideration for somebody else's feelings. It's about being generous with your time, if not necessarily your wallet. It's about consideration. So all those attributes as such. And I think it's really worth exploring why effectively some business owners, some people who work in businesses are maybe not as kind as they are. Now, I'm running my own business for the last 28 plus years. I've been involved in the world of business for about 35, 40 years here in different guises. And I know that I've met lots of business owners in different shapes, different forms, different sizes. Some have been very engaging. Some have been quite what you might call characteristics in business, quite harsh, quite toxic. But outside of that environment, outside of that work environment, when you actually get to know them better, the majority of them are very nice people, very engaging, and what you consider kind. So I think for me, there's an element of what goes on between individuals in their personal lives and when they make that step into and that transition into the world of business, into the world of work. Something's going on to actually shape and influence that dynamic. And I think it's really important for all of us, whether we are on the receiving end of unkind behavior or whether we're in a situation where we wish to be kinder in our businesses, is to actually understand that position and actually exhibit some degree of empathy. I think it's quite common that individuals don't necessarily recognize the transition and the pressure, if you want to call it that impacts on business owners, those who are in senior management, those decision makers here, that maybe influence and makes them the people they are in the world of business. Now, if I look at the evolution of business practices over the last 30 to 50 years here, there are a number of fundamental changes here, which actually has made this conversation much more relevant now than it would have been perhaps, say, 15, 20 years ago. So we had historically, we've evolved from that very large sort of corporate type business affair. We didn't have, in the pre-age of the internet, pre-age of social media, business organizations were much larger in size. The barriers to entry to starting up were much greater. effectively the cost of money to actually start a business, what you had to do to get started, was much more of a barrier to entry than it would be necessarily now. We only have to look at the world of banking, for example, and there used to be a time that you used to have about 10, 15,000 customers you needed to make your business viable. Now, in the worlds of fintech, world of online banking here, those entry points are much lower. Every single business owner that I've ever encountered, and again, whatever business they're running in terms of type or in size, that transition, what goes on between your ears, the biggest battleground you ever like to face here, is a massive one that goes on. So if you are in your personal life, you obviously want to look after your friends, look after your family, you've got a different dynamic going on. The pressures as such are not as acute as when you enter the world of business, whether you're starting up, whether you're in senior management, or whether you're, been many years in business. And what I normally find is it takes a long time for people to make that transition, okay, into the world of business here. And we hear lots of rubbish, we hear lots of fluff, we watch TV programs, where the idea of battle is very much prevalent in the world of business. This idea of antagonism, negotiation is all about being, pumping your chest and actually driving bargains down, which is good. But actually that, so I use that expression, macho behavior, that way of actually conducting yourself in business is a bit flawed now. Also, that's not the reality of it. Also, a business owner tends to have many more pressures placed upon them. Ultimately, at the end of the day, when teams go home, when staff goes home, they're still at the other end absorbing all that flux that's going on, having to think about, in terms of maintaining their staff, making sure the money's in the bank, making sure they keep customers happy. There's personal pressures that go on them. There may be issues in terms of going on outside of that. So the life of a business owner typically tends to be quite lonely, tends to be quite isolated. And we've got this continual pressure going on all the time about having to compete, having to be a version of yourself and ourselves that may not actually be prevalent. Now, I'm not saying that that excuses bad behavior, but I think you've got to understand those pressures that build up, the environment of a business owner, the idea of a senior manager, the accountability to perhaps investors, the accountability to banks, the accountability to teams. I mean, businesses are largely family units. They can be dysfunctional family units, but they're family units nevertheless. So all those pressures that bear on an individual is going to have an impact on how they conduct themselves in the world of business. It could be, that they've not necessarily learned how businesses learn literally on a realistic, as you go through scale, not suddenly one day I'm a perfect entrepreneur, I'm a brilliant business here. We all know that business owners will make mistakes. In my 28 years of business, I've made mistakes. Some are quite challenging, shall we say, in the early stages, but occasionally those still pop up. So you're always learning, you're always making mistakes, and there's lots of complex behaviors that are going on to explain why, people can be unkind in business. Now, it's not saying it's condoning it, but we've got to understand here, one of the key things to being kinder in a business environment is to have empathy. That's an understanding of how the other person we're dealing with, how the other business we're dealing with, how they view the world. And that how they view the world is really important for us to understand, for us to actually move forward. Now, it doesn't mean we have to agree with their view of the world, but you have to understand it. You can't shut down conversations. You can't say, no, I'm not listening here. If you don't have empathy, it's very, very difficult to progress going forward. And that's got a practical element to it. If we look in terms of marketing, marketing is a great example to look at. Marketers would say, know your customer, KYC. If you know your customer, what they like, the pain that you're trying to solve, the problems that you want to put right, what solutions you've got to make that right, and you can actually communicate them, engage them in the language that they understand and comprehend. Eventually, that transaction will execute itself and they will buy from you. They know, like, and trust. So if we take that idea that empathy is a fantastic thing in terms of getting new business, getting new customers, then also it's critical to have empathy for every interaction that we have as a business owner. I'm talking business owners. Obviously, if you're a senior manager, if you're a decision maker, even if you have no decision-making responsibility, kindness is something that's got to exist in all of us in business, whichever way that actually flows in terms of our interactions. So that's one dynamic. Now, what is kindness? Kindness isn't about being weak. Some people consider it, maybe the word itself, by the way, gives us that impression. Kindness is not a sign of weakness. It's not about saying that you have to be nice, saying please and thank yous. Even psychopaths, even very toxic individuals can say please and thank you. That doesn't actually make them kind. It just means they can actually sort of be polite. So politeness is not part of it. It's not about being nice. It's not about being weak. You know, we have situations in our lives, in our business lives, where you're going to make tough decisions. You're going to make tough decisions about perhaps, you know, staff that you're going to retain. If you've got sort of real economic pressures coming down on your business, you've got to make decisions about pricing. You've got to make decisions about recruitment. You've got to make decisions whether you drop suppliers, take on new suppliers. All those decisions will involve some element of, you know, being tough, being resilient, and making the right choice. So underpinning kindness, supporting kindness, we're not talking about throwing away good business disciplines. Those good business disciplines still need to exist. You still need good systems. You still need to make those decisions, and you need to confront situations. You know, we visit dentists. Dentists aren't always the most pleasant experience here, but you can still have kind dentists. So don't confuse kindness with actually being weak. Don't confuse kindness with actually weak leadership there as well. If anything, weak leadership is not recognizing that kindness can actually play a very strong part in your business. So having established the idea of perhaps why kindness doesn't exist as widely as we would expect, we've got different society, different pressures on business owners. We've got different expectations. We've got that idea that profitability, making money to keep the business going, is a bigger pressure that we might find in any other situation. So all those come to bear. What the individual brings to themselves in that business environment all play their part. We talk about what kindness isn't, and it's not a weakness. It's not about just being nice. It's not about being pleasant. It's not about just being affable, even though they're very admirable here. It's about the empathy. It's about the understanding. It's about being generous with your time. It's about recognizing those people that we deal with as human beings. It's about being honest. It's about being honest with yourself. And it's about also being kind to yourself, by the way. So this is not just an external facing facet. It's not just being about kind to those people you interact with, but it's also about being kind to yourself. And that manifests itself in a number of different ways. Now, having understood, I suppose, why we get to this situation, what's the business case for it? What's the business benefits? Well, there's a number of really good positive things to put forward as to why kindness is a really good thing to pursue. Later on in this broadcast, by the way, folks, I'm going to give you some tips about examples of kindness. If you feel that in your business environment, your business, that you want to be kinder, then, you know, perhaps some tips to show you how you can make that progression to being kinder and all the rest of it. So effectively, why it's good? Well, if you've got a team of people working with you, people gravitate towards more positive work environments, work cultures. So if you've got kindness, that's an endemic part of your business culture, part of your business values, and that obviously got to be recommended, then, you know, you'll find that employees tend to be more motivated, tend to want to be connected to that organization, tend to be want to connected to you. And it's definitely very much, you know, a very powerful thing. Customers, if you're kinder to customers, if you're kinder to prospects, if you're kinder to suppliers, then there's a stronger willingness to be part of that whole family unit you're creating for your business environment. So that's really important. It's also got other positive attributes. The studies have shown that people who act kindly in their businesses, they get a lot of positive sort of dopamine rush for themselves, and dopamine rushes are normally positive. And also, it's as much for the giver as it is for the receiver of kindness. So you will feel a stronger sense of well-being. And if you feel a stronger sense of well-being and you feel more positive in yourself, then you will find that you're actually a much stronger individual within your own business there as well. So in terms of what goes on between that is a really powerful thing. And I think lots of business owners tend to neglect themselves, tend not to really consider themselves in the whole equation. Those individuals that they're looking after, their customers, their suppliers, their own staff team, their freelancers, everyone who's part of that supply chain, you know, remember, you're at the center of all this here, so you actually owe it to be kind to yourself. Other positive reasons there, it enforces, it's, you know, part of actually building up that brand. And I think what I've noticed over the 28 years or so that I've been in business here, there's been a definite evolution away from the faceless business behind a logo to very much more in terms of personal branding. Now, I'm not saying every business should be personally branded, but there's definitely a migration where individuals, consumers, suppliers, customers, because I would suggest because of the impact of things like social media, because the world is a much more open place in some respects, albeit closed in other facets here, we tend to want to see more of the human face behind a business. So therefore, that idea of being kind enhances reputation, reinforces brand values, gives something more engaging for our customers, our suppliers out there, and also it's a great barrier to entry for competitors and the like. Now, I think it's really key to me to stress this. If you want to be kind in your business, which is, I think, is an admirable thing, you've got to be sincere in it. So false ideas of, falsely smiling, going through the motions of being kinder and exhibiting that behavior when it's not really genuinely heartfelt, it will be a definite giveaway. People can detect falseness. People can detect some insincerity here. So if you're not feeling it, don't force it. You can work towards it, but it's about genuine acts of kindness. Now, how does kindness manifest itself? It could start off from the very fact that if you feel, and there's a bit of self-diagnosis going on here, that even smiling at people even more, even saying thank you. There's been lots of studies that have said that yes, money is a influencing factor in what people do, that motivation, that desire to reach their performance objectives. There's money does play its part, but it's not the only element. There have been many scientific studies from what they call the Hawthorne experiment here, where they found that money has a short-term gain. And I'm not recommending, by the way, that we don't pay our employees. You've got to pay them decently. You've got to pay them a good living wage. You've got to pay them, not only what the job commands here, but you've got to make sure that they've got good value as well. So it's taken as read that remuneration package is part of it. But it's not only that. If you're not recognizing the good things that your employees do, by recognizing it, it's vocalizing it. And it's not necessarily big reward packages. You could be literally saying, good job, and being sincere. Recognizing the inputs that your staff are providing, recognizing the contribution they're actually making, recognizing perhaps when things aren't quite right, instead of bemoaning that in private, you talk to them, as grown-ups, you empathize with it and try and understand why things aren't going quite as they want to, and you have those honest conversations and dialogues with them. Help them in their self-development, help them improve those things, and your organization, in my opinion, should be what's called a learning organization. So by doing those little acts there, might not mean a great deal to you, but it can mean a tremendous impact for your staff and your team there as well. People like to be recognized for the good things, and therefore, actually acknowledging that goes a long way to actually sort of reinforce that sort of sense of kindness. It could be about leaving reviews for your clients, your suppliers. How many of us, and I'm probably guilty of this myself, I always like to get reviews. I am getting better in doing those reviews and recommendations. We always put it down to time poor, but have you thought about perhaps giving a review, a recommendation to your suppliers if they've done a good job? Why not tell the world about it? That's an act of kindness in itself. In terms of cutting suppliers slack, in terms of being positive about customers, if people are applying for jobs, if people and you find that they're not suitable, that's fine. Nobody's saying select people who aren't suitable here, but an acknowledgement, a recognition, of that application, even though it might become quite time heavy, is an act of kindness. And in suppliers that I deal with, by the way, when I deal with recruiting for new suppliers, new freelancers, even if I don't necessarily take them on to deliver a project, a piece of work, I'll do my damnedest to make sure that at least I'll recognise them, thank them for actually taking the time to submit their proposal, to submit some thoughts there. I mean, that takes time from that individual. So at least to acknowledge it and not to ignore it goes a long way as an act of kindness. So again, it's about empathy. It's about putting yourself in the shoes. How many of us have felt frustrated when we put in a proposal, put in a quote, made a comment about something and somebody's not responded? How does that make you feel? I know I don't think particularly like it too much. Just think how it goes the other way round. We don't behave as other people do. We behave as we should be doing ourselves here. So, kindness is an endemic thing. Most of you out there, unless you're a psychopath or an idiot or a dick, you will be behaving very kindly outside of outside of a business environment. It's about taking some of that and applying it in your business and your work environment as well. Now, how do we actually go about implementing it? Well, we go about implementing it. Do not do it to whole scale. If you have any changes in behavior changes come in very small incremental steps. So small, tiny steps of progress, small, tiny steps of affirmation, positive affirmation, are likely to achieve better results than saying whole scale, tomorrow, this is our new strategy. So my thoughts would be, if I draw a very crude analogy with the idea perhaps you want a healthier lifestyle, you feel like you want to increase your sort of level of physical fitness, you might say, well, actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to now go to the gym 30 minutes every single day, and I'm going to do a great workout. I'm going to be drinking bat urine and all those other weird and wonderful things there as well, and I'm going to improve my ability. You might do it for one day, you might do it for 2 days, but effectively on day 3, you might have been up to it, you miss it out, you crash and burn, you don't sustain it. And that might be quite a big jump. And then what happens is that reinforces that idea that you can't do it because you've actually tripped up on the 3rd hurdle. So actually just doing it little micro steps, and all of us can exhibit that impatience here that says, let me do 5 minutes today. Let me just continue doing 5 minutes every day. Let me build up the habit. Let me build up the muscle for that sort of behavior change. And then I can actually increase it accordingly. And that's what I would strongly suggest that you do. So think about those small acts of kindness that you do maybe on a daily basis. Take the time, take a breath and think, okay, somebody done something really positive in my business today. Should I actually acknowledge that? And the answer is obviously yes. So even if you just do that, you can build it up. In the bigger scale, it all comes from leadership. It all comes from you. So if you are a business owner, if you're a senior manager, you know, the behavior that you exhibit sets the standard, sets the stall out for how you want others to behave. So it's got to come ultimately from the top. And then might be little modifications to behavior that you can do that actually reflects that, but it's got to be a cultural change. And that big cultural change, by the way, is going to take time. So it's going to take months, it's going to take years, but little small footsteps, okay, are the great way to advance to that. And again, don't say, oh, I wish I could be kinder, I want to be kinder. Make it as a positive, I am going to do X, Y, Z. You could set these as what I call smart things, by the way, make them specific, make them measurable, make them acceptable by yourself and the rest of your team, realistic in the context of what you're trying to achieve, and make them time bound. So I will acknowledge my staff's contribution on a daily basis, or I will do it on a weekly basis. Whatever that is, just make it as a positive statement and stick to it and follow it. Other things I would suggest, by the way, folks, is that if you are on a long term looking to make yourselves a kinder business, a kinder organization, and you want that sincerity to shine through, you need measures as well. Now, obviously, trust an accountant to bring in the idea of KPIs, but you know, how do you recognize, if you want to really seriously embed it into your business, really embed it into your business strategy, and you want to change and modify that behavior, how do you recognize it's happening? Now, it might be by a certain events you're carrying out. So could it be that you and your team could contribute some of your time to perhaps some altruism, some charity projects, whether they're one-off? Are there things that you can do to help your local community? Could you do things to perhaps have a better positive environmental impact there? Those are acts of kindness as well. Are there things that you could do internally in terms of, you know, especially with the economic winds blowing as they are, in terms of energy conservation, changing what you do, changing habits? So those are just a few examples of things that we can do. Ultimately, you will feel much stronger for it. You will feel much more positive for it as well. Remember, it's not about being weak. It's not about not confronting those tough decisions. It's not about effectively giving in to somebody. It's not about agreeing with somebody for the sake of it. It's about being assertive. It's about having resilience. It's about having empathy. It's about having consideration for people's feelings. And unfortunately, over the years, I've had to let go of people. I don't mean that's like over a bridge or anything, but sack them and dismiss them. But I'd like to think I've done it with an element of kindness. If you've got to dismiss people, if there's redundancies in that, yeah, the right way to do that. Obviously, don't follow the P&O, suddenly a Zoom announcement, and that's all, they're all gone. Act with some degree of compassion, act with some degree of humanity. Folks, listen, I hope you found that of use. I'd love your feedback, love your comments. If you think what I've talked is a load of garbage, if you think I've made some sense, some comments that you agree with, and what would be your tips for businesses to be kinder? What would you share as either an example of kindness, or how you would go about making businesses kinder in their actual practices and disciplines? Folks, I hope you enjoyed, got some value from this. I'm looking forward to speaking to you guys next week. Now, next week, I'll forewarn what we're going to be talking about. We've got a situation in the UK and the rest of the world here that we've got strong economic winds blowing. Some can be quite harsh. We can get into an era of panic and think, oh my gosh, what's going on? So next week, I'm going to be talking about financial storytelling, and in fact, grabbing that B word about budgeting. So watch out here. More details will be announced in due course. But until then, folks, have a super rest of the Saturday, and I look forward to speaking to you all next week. And I think what we need to do is to play out as we play.